All right, guys, let's talk about the new Mr. and Mrs. Smith series on Amazon Prime. Look, this was created by Donald Glover and Francesca Sloan. Originally, Donald Glover and Phoebe Waller-Bridge worked on it, but she walked away, and so Francesca Sloan and Glover finished the series. Look, this is somewhat inspired by the 2005 films starring Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt that was written by Simon Kinberg and directed by Doug Liman. This time around, Donald Glover and Maya Erskine play John and Jane Smith, two spies who are hired by the same company, who we don't know what that company is, but they are hired as spies separately, and then they are put together, and their goal is to play a married couple, but also like do spy stuff. Like that's their undercover thing. Look, this series super works. It's very, very good. It lives and dies on the chemistry between Glover and Erskine. They are really, really good in these roles. They feel like a real couple. They go throughout this 8-episode run of this season, and they go through all the trials and tribulations of being in a relationship. Like the titles of the episodes even kind of focus on that. Like the first episode is called First Date, and then Second Date, First Vacation, and then there's a couples therapy episode, and then a one called Do You Want Kids and stuff like that. And so they use the titles as sort of a weird offshoot of what they're kind of going through in the relation or in their relationship, but also as kind of a note for what's happening in the sort of spy side of the series, right? So it's about probably 60-40 relationship kind of stuff to the spy stuff, but they very much intertwine, right? You find that John and Jane live in New York. They have contact with this, like over this computer screen with their handler or whatever named Hi, as they call it, who kind of gives them assignments. In every episode, they have these particular assignments that they have to do. But so much of the series focuses on their developing relationship and how that affects them even on missions, but it also just affects them as people, right? It's clever. It's really clever. The way that things are written are fairly clever. As far as like one of my favorite episodes is called Do You Want Kids? And the way that episode is structured, that's the 5th episode. The way things are structured in that episode plays against this idea of this very serious conversation of like, you know, what do you want? Where do you want this relationship to go ultimately and stuff like that, and where and why? So it's sort of a microcosm of the other episodes in how well they handle that. There's a lot of cool cameos from people that they interact with, both in their regular civilian life and as spies. It's kind of cool because it doesn't all stay in New York. They go out to these different countries to do these particular jobs all the time, right? And it just be like, all right, you got a job in Italy, and they have to go off to Italy or somewhere else, and it's cool, and it finds them in all sorts of, like, I wouldn't say bizarre places, but it lets them be sort of globe hopping and makes it feel like the show is much bigger than just in one city, right? Which I think is important. The soundtrack is done by David Fleming, who developed what I think is a very cool soundtrack. It has a James Bond kind of feel to it, like old school James Bond. But the music super works. The other thing is, look, I think Glover as John is very good. John and Jane, they play everything kind of against type, right? Where normally the man is played as like emotionally closed off, and you don't know like what does he really think and all this other stuff, and the woman is always kind of like trying to draw him out. No, they play it against type. Like John is very much like, why don't we just talk about what's going on? And Jane is the sort of closed book kind of character, and you kind of slowly kind of peel back the layers of her character and find out why she is the way she is and why she's the way she is in her spy work, as well as why she is the way she is in the relationship. And those things very much overlap. So I kind of like that. They kind of undercut a lot of expectations of what these characters and what this series is supposed to be. And I think it works really well. Giving this show or giving this this IP 8 hours to breathe and really dig into those characters is a much better idea than trying to hard smash it in an hour and a half. I think it gives John and Jane, like, as characters, you get to really see them as individuals, right? And there are times where you're just like, should they even be together, like, as spies or even in a relationship? Like, maybe that's not a good idea. And then there's other moments where you get it and it works really well. And, like, you know, like, couples go through shit. So, like, when stuff isn't working well in the relationship side, like, it affects them on the spy side. And when stuff is going really well on the relationship side, it affects it on the spy side, right? Like, so it's very cool. And, like, just this sort of mishmash of those two worlds coming together works really cool. It's a great general idea and general premise for a series or a movie, but it works so much better here to actually develop those characters. Like, you get a little bit of comedy, but that's sort of like irreverent comedy that you got in Atlanta with Donald Glover, and part of that is he's got people that he worked with on that show. Hiro Murai, who directed a lot of stuff in Atlanta, quite a bit of episodes, and I believe was a co-creator and helped write a lot of it. He's back in this series too. So you get a little bit, like, if you loved Atlanta, and I did, and you like those kind of like weird episodes that weren't like off the main cast stories, and they were kind of like, what is this kind of wacky story that they're trying to do, and what is the meaning of all that? A lot of this feels like that, right? Which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But you see a lot of similarities to those kind of episodes in Atlanta to this, and it works really well. There's Jane has like a bit of a dark, twisted humor about certain things that are pretty fucked up, actually. And you find John being like, yeah, okay, like, that's a bit weird, but, like, he kind of goes with it. And then she becomes a little bit more like him by the end, and he becomes a little bit more like her in the end, which is what happens in a relationship, right? Like, parts of you mesh together well, or, you know, you kind of meet each other in the middle about certain things. And it just does such a good job of telling the standard rom-com story in a clever way, right? As one of my co-hosts loves to say, you know, there's nothing wrong with a common story being told well, right? To paraphrase him. And that's what this is. You've seen this story before. You've seen the rom-com story before. And again, it's less comedy, but you've seen that romantic story being told before, but you've not quite seen it told in this way. And that's what's really intriguing. Look, Glover putting his name on any sort of creative stuff immediately gets my attention, and I think this proves it yet again. Like, this guy is a real artist. Him and Francesca Sloan really did a great job in taking this property that I think a lot of people just kind of was like, oh, that movie's all right, it's kind of forgettable, and making this into something that people can really talk about and really enjoy, and like, really generate, like, some level, if people still do this, like, water cooler kind of talk around what the series does and what the series kind of brings to this general conversation. So yeah, highly recommend Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's 8 episodes on Amazon Prime, and we'll see you guys next time.